After my wife died, I believed the worst part of my life was over. I was wrong. The real pain didn't come from the funeral. It didn't come from the empty bed beside me. It came days later. From the people I trusted more than anyone else on this earth. My name is Thomas Walker. I'm 68 years old. And this is the story of how my own children locked me out of my home. And why they never expected what followed. Before I take you deeper into what happened next in my life. Before you see how this story truly unfolds, take a moment to subscribe to this channel. And in the comments, tell me where you're watching from, your city or country. If you've ever felt betrayed by your own family, you'll understand every word of this. My wife and I were married for 43 years. She wasn't just my partner, she was my foundation. Every decision I made, every sacrifice, every late night at work, it was always for us. When she passed away, the house didn't just feel empty. It felt abandoned. The silence was unbearable. Even the clock on the wall sounded louder than it ever had before. The funeral came and went like a fog. People hugged me, offered condolences, told me how strong I was. My children stood beside me, quiet and respectful. They looked like a perfect family. I believed that image. The first few days after the funeral, I barely functioned. I ate when someone reminded me. Slept in short, restless stretches. Spent hours staring at old photographs. Meanwhile, my children were busy. They said they were handling things. Paperwork. Calls. Arrangements. At the time, I was grateful. Grief makes you lean on others. It makes you ignore warning signs. But slowly, things began to feel off. They stopped asking me questions. They started making decisions. One afternoon, my son casually asked, "Dad, where do you keep the deed to the house?" I looked at him, confused. "Why do you need that now?" "Just planning ahead," he said quickly. "You shouldn't worry about these things anymore." That sentence stayed with me. You shouldn't worry about these things anymore. Then came questions about bank accounts, insurance, my will. Each time, I said the same thing. "We'll talk later." They smiled, nodded, and waited. A week after the funeral, I decided to step outside. I needed air. I needed to feel like the world still existed. I took a long walk through the neighborhood. People waved politely, offering quiet sympathy. When I came back home, something was wrong. My key didn't work. I tried again. Then again. The lock was different. At first, I thought I was mistaken. That grief had scrambled my mind. Then I noticed my bags. Packed neatly. Placed beside the door. I knocked. No answer. I knocked harder. Finally, my daughter opened the door just enough to speak. "Dad, we need to talk." She wouldn't look at me. She told me calmly, almost rehearsed, that they thought it would be best if I stayed somewhere else for a while. For my health. For my safety. I laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was unreal. "This is my house," I said. She nodded, tears in her eyes. "We know. But right now, this is what's best." That was the moment I understood. This wasn't concern. This wasn't love. This was control. They had decided, without me, that my grief made me weak. That my silence meant permission. I didn't shout. I didn't beg. I picked up my bags and walked away. Because when people think they've already won, they stop hiding their mistakes. That night, I stayed with an old friend. I barely slept. I replayed every conversation from the past few years. Every time I'd brushed off my wife's quiet concerns. Every time I told myself, they mean well. By morning, something inside me had changed. My grief didn't disappear. But it sharpened. I realized something my children didn't. The house wasn't just a house. The money wasn't just money. Years ago, my wife and I had prepared for moments like this. Trusts, conditions, protections. We never imagined our children would turn on me so quickly. But we prepared anyway. They assumed I was broken, confused, easy to push aside. They were wrong. That morning I called my lawyer. Not in panic. Not in anger. In calm. I told him everything. When I finished, there was a long pause. Then he said quietly, "They shouldn't have done this." That sentence gave me something I hadn't felt in days. Control. I didn't rush back to the house. I didn't confront my children. Instead, I waited. Because revenge doesn't begin with shouting. It begins with patience. And while my children celebrated what they thought was a victory, they had no idea. They had just triggered consequences they could never undo. The days after that phone call felt unreal. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just quiet. The kind of quiet where you finally hear the truth you've been avoiding for years. I didn't go back to the house. Not once. That wasn't weakness. That was strategy. Because when people believe they'd push you out for good, they get careless. Before I go further into what happened next in my life, before you see how this story truly unfolds, take a moment to subscribe to this channel. And in the comments, tell me where you're watching from, your city or country. If your own family has ever made you feel disposable, this story will hit home. I stayed with my old friend for a few weeks. He didn't ask questions. He didn't push advice. He just gave me space. During the day, I kept myself busy. Walks. Coffee shops. Long drives. At night I thought. I thought about the early years of raising my children. The overtime shifts. The vacations we skipped. The promotions I turned down because I didn't want to be that father. I remembered the promises I made to my wife. No matter what happens, we protect each other first. And that's when it hit me. My children hadn't just locked me out of a house. They had broken a boundary they didn't even know existed. 2 days after the call with my lawyer, we met in person. He spread documents across his desk. Deeds. Trust papers. Amendments my wife and I had signed quietly years ago. He looked at me and said, "They think ownership and control are the same thing." They weren't. The house? Placed in a living trust. The accounts? Conditional access. The will? Structured with safeguards that activated only if certain behaviors occurred. And what my children had done, locking me out, removing my access, making decisions without legal authority, had triggered several of those conditions. I didn't smile. I didn't celebrate. I felt something better. Relief. Because the narrative they were telling themselves was already collapsing. They just didn't know it yet. My lawyer advised patience. "Let them keep going," he said. "The more confident they get, the clearer everything becomes." So I waited. And while I waited, my children revealed exactly who they were. They stopped calling me. Not even to check if I was okay. Instead, they started calling professionals. Contractors. Bank representatives. Real estate agents. I found out later they had already discussed selling the house. My house. The one my wife died in. The one they locked me out of. They assumed I was powerless. Then came the first message. A short text from my son. "Dad, we're making some changes. Don't worry about it. We're handling things." No question. No respect. Just a statement. I didn't reply. Silence can be terrifying when the other side expects resistance. A week later, my lawyer called. "They've contacted the trust administrator," he said. And that's where things get interesting. Because the administrator didn't answer to them. He answered to the documents. And the documents were very clear. Any attempt to transfer, sell, or alter trust property without unanimous legal consent would immediately freeze access. Which is exactly what happened. Suddenly, accounts stalled. Approvals were delayed. Processes slowed down. My children panicked. They started arguing with each other, blaming each other. And finally, they remembered I existed. My daughter called first. Her voice was soft, concerned. "Dad, we're just worried about you. We want what's best." I almost laughed. Instead, I said calmly, "I'm doing just fine." That confused her. She expected anger, begging. She got neither. Then my son called. Less polite, more aggressive. "There are issues with the accounts," he said. "You need to fix this." I paused. "Fix what?" I asked. "The delays. The blocks. Whatever you did. Whatever I did." That was the moment he realized something was wrong. I told him the truth, but not all of it. "I didn't do anything," I said. "I just didn't stop what was already in place." Silence. Then anger. "You're doing this on purpose." "No," I replied. "You did this when you locked me out." He hung up. From that moment on, everything changed. They stopped pretending. They started pushing. Emails. Voicemails. Even threats. All of it documented. All of it useful. Meanwhile, I stayed calm. Because I knew something they didn't. The law doesn't care about entitlement. It cares about evidence. And they were creating plenty. My lawyer prepared quietly. Not aggressively. Precisely. Each move they made tightened the situation around them. Then came the meeting request. They wanted to talk things out. Together. In person. I agreed. Not because I needed closure. Because they needed exposure. We met in a neutral office. No home field advantage. No emotional stage. They walked in confident. Still believing they were in control. They spoke first. Accusations? Excuses? Justifications. I listened. When they finished, my lawyer spoke. Slowly. Carefully. He laid out the facts. The trust violations. The unauthorized actions. The legal consequences already in motion. The color drained from their faces. For the first time, they realized this wasn't about family drama. This was about accountability. And accountability doesn't negotiate with guilt. I said very little. Just one sentence. "You should have talked to me instead of locking me out." They didn't answer. Because they finally understood. They hadn't outsmarted me. They had exposed themselves. And what was coming next would change our relationship forever. The meeting didn't end with shouting. It ended with silence. The kind of silence that settles when people finally realize they're not as smart as they thought they were. My children walked out of that office without looking at me. No apology. No explanation. Just fear. And fear makes people do reckless things. Before I take you further into what happened next in my life, before you see how this story truly unfolds, take a moment to subscribe to this channel. And in the comments, tell me where you're watching from, your city or country. If you've ever watched people panic when the truth catches up to them, you'll understand what comes next. A few days after that meeting, my lawyer called again. "They're scrambling," he said. "Trying to move assets. Trying to protect themselves." I wasn't surprised. People who believe they're entitled to everything panic when they realize entitlement isn't legal authority. What surprised me was how far they were willing to go. They started rewriting the story. To relatives. To friends. To anyone who would listen. Suddenly, I was the villain. The grieving old man who had lost his judgment. The father who was being manipulated by lawyers. The obstacle standing in the way of what my wife would have wanted. They even claimed I had agreed to leave the house. None of it was true. And none of it mattered. Because lies collapse under documentation. Every message they sent. Every threat. Every attempt to pressure me. My lawyer collected it all. Then came the first official notice. Not to me. To them. A formal warning from the trust administrator. Clear. Unemotional. Legal. Any further unauthorized actions would result in full legal intervention. That letter changed the tone completely. My daughter called me that night. She was crying. Real tears this time. "Dad, please," she said. "We never meant for it to go this far." I asked her one question. "Did you change the locks?" She didn't answer. That told me everything. My son, on the other hand, reacted differently. Anger replaced confidence. He sent a long email accusing me of manipulation, of revenge, of punishing them for trying to help. He ended it with one sentence that revealed his real fear. This could destroy us. Not our relationship. Not our family. Us. Their plans. Their expectations. That's when I knew the truth had fully surfaced. This was never about my well-being. It was about control and inheritance. The next escalation came faster than I expected. They tried to involve authorities. A wellness concern. A claim that I was being taken advantage of. That I wasn't mentally capable of managing my affairs. A quiet attempt to discredit me. My lawyer smiled when he heard. "Let them," he said. Because I wasn't hiding. I had medical evaluations. Independent assessments. Clear documentation. Everything they alleged collapsed within days. And that attempt? It backfired. Hard. It raised questions about their behavior. Why would children try to remove legal autonomy from a capable parent? After locking him out of his own home? That question followed them everywhere. Relatives stopped taking sides. Friends stopped returning their calls. The narrative they tried to control was slipping away. Then came the moment that hurt more than anything else. I was asked to retrieve a few personal items from the house. Supervised. Not by my children. By a neutral third party. Walking back into that house felt like stepping into a museum of my own life. Everything looked the same. And nothing felt familiar. Photos had been moved. Drawers searched. Files reorganized. They hadn't just locked me out. They had gone through my life. I picked up a framed picture of my wife and me. And noticed it was no longer on display. That's when the sadness hit. Not rage. Sadness. Because I realized something irreversible had happened. Even if I won legally, the family I thought I had was already gone. Outside, my son waited in the car. He didn't get out. Didn't speak. That silence said more than any argument ever could. The following weeks were procedural. Motions. Reviews. Formal notices. My lawyer remained calm and methodical. My children grew desperate. They offered compromises. Then apologies. Then accusations again. Each shift revealing their true motivation. At one point, my daughter said something that finally broke the illusion. "You don't even need all of this anymore." I looked at her. "All of what?" I asked. "The house. The accounts. The control." Control. There it was. They weren't asking for reconciliation. They were asking for surrender. And I finally understood. If I gave in now, they would learn nothing. They would do this again. Maybe to me. Maybe to someone else. So I said no. Not angrily. Firmly. That refusal triggered the final phase. Formal legal action. Not revenge. Resolution. The trust provisions activated fully. Ownership clarified. Access defined. Consequences enforced. My children received official notices outlining exactly where they stood. And for the first time, they stood on nothing. They called me one last time together. Not separately. Together. They asked to meet again. I agreed. Because this time, they weren't coming to negotiate power. They were coming to face reality. And I knew the next conversation would decide everything. The day I agreed to meet them again was heavy. Not with anger, not with grief, but with clarity. For the first time since my wife passed, I felt fully awake. Every betrayal, every manipulative action my children took, had led to this moment. Before I take you deeper into what happened next in my life, before you see how this story truly unfolds, take a moment to subscribe to this channel. And in the comments, tell me where you're watching from, your city or country. If your own family has ever underestimated you, you'll understand what comes next. We met in the same neutral office as before. This time, there was no bravado, no misplaced confidence. Their eyes flickered nervously as they saw me walk in. They expected fear. They expected hesitation. They expected an old, broken man. Instead, I came prepared, calm, collected, and fully aware of every legal and emotional advantage I held. They started talking first. "Dad, my daughter began, but stopped mid-sentence. The words sounded weak, rehearsed. My son, trying to assert himself, said, "We just want things to be fair. To be reasonable." Reasonable. The word made me smile quietly inside. Because fairness requires balance, and they had none. I listened as they stumbled through excuses, apologies, half-truths. Every sentence betrayed their anxiety. Every glance at each other revealed fear. My lawyer finally spoke. Slowly. Methodically. He recounted every unauthorized action. Every attempt to misrepresent facts. Every violation of the trust provisions. My children went pale. I could see them realizing, too late, that the foundation they had tried to shake was unshakable. Then I spoke. Not loud. Not angry. Just calmly. "You thought locking me out would end the conversation. It didn't. You thought taking control would give you power. It didn't. And every lie, every manipulation you used only exposed yourselves." They tried to interrupt, but I held up a hand. "No. Let me finish." And I did. I explained, in simple, clear terms, how every attempt they made violated legal provisions, how they had triggered safeguards, how the house, accounts, and documents were structured for moments exactly like this. Their faces shifted from panic to shock to despair. And in that moment, I felt the weight of years of sacrifice, patience, and silent endurance begin to turn into justice. They pleaded, offered compromises, promises, apologies. But I saw the truth behind their eyes. They weren't remorseful for their actions. They were fearful of consequences. And I knew I had to make one decision. Not revenge. Not anger. But a choice that would set the record straight. And make them understand the boundaries they had crossed. I let them speak. Let them beg. Let them try to manipulate again. Then I laid it out simply. The trust and all associated documents will remain as structured. Your access will continue only under the conditions already defined. You will respect the rules. You will respect me. And you will understand, every action you take outside of that will trigger consequences you cannot undo. They were silent. I didn't need to raise my voice. The weight of truth, the clarity of authority, was enough. And for the first time in years I felt a shift. Not just in the legal standing. Not just in control of my property, but in my own dignity. My children realized that power wasn't theirs to claim. It had never been. And every attempt to seize it had only made them weaker. After a long, tense hour, we left the office. I returned to my home that night. Not as a defeated father. Not as a man pushed aside by his own family. But as someone who had survived betrayal and had restored the order that should have never been broken. That night, I walked through the halls of my house. Every picture. Every memory. Every corner that my wife and I had built together. Everything was mine again. Not because of anger. Not because of revenge. But because I had been patient, careful, and clear. And as I sat in my favorite chair, I realized something even more important. My children had learned a lesson. Not the one they expected. Not the one I had planned. But the one that mattered most. Respect cannot be stolen. Trust cannot be forced. And the bonds of family, once broken by betrayal, can only be repaired with accountability and truth. I didn't call them that night. I didn't need to. They would remember every moment of that day. And that memory, silent and heavy, would follow them for a lifetime. Because sometimes, the most powerful form of revenge is simply letting people face the consequences of their own choices. And as I looked around my home, the house that had felt abandoned just weeks before, I knew one thing for certain. I had survived loss. I had survived betrayal. And I had emerged stronger than I had ever imagined. The days after that meeting were quiet. Not peaceful. Not calm. But charged with a new kind of understanding. My children didn't know how to approach me. They tiptoed around the house, avoided eye contact, and struggled to find words that wouldn't betray fear. It was my quiet observation that made me realize something profound. Their panic wasn't just about money. It wasn't about the house. It was about control. For the first time in years, I felt I truly understood my children. And perhaps for the first time, they truly understood me. The following week, I began to meet them individually. One conversation at a time. No shouting. No blaming. Just questions and answers. "Why did you lock me out?" I asked my daughter first. She looked down, ashamed. We didn't know what else to do," she admitted. "I thought we were helping." Helping. That word echoed in my head. "You didn't help," I said softly. "You took control without understanding the consequences. And in doing so, you broke trust, with me, with yourselves." She nodded, tears in her eyes. My son was harder. Anger masked his fear at first. He tried to argue, to justify. "I was only trying to protect Mom's legacy," he said. "Protect?" I asked. "By locking me out? By misrepresenting facts? By threatening to alter things without authority? You protected nothing. You endangered everything." Silence. Finally, comprehension. For the first time, they understood the real cost of their actions. Then came the hardest conversation, the one with both of them together. We sat around the dining room table, the place where countless family meals and memories had been made. The weight of the past week settled like a thick fog. "I don't want control," my daughter said quietly. "I just didn't know how to deal with losing Mom and seeing you broken." I nodded. "I understand grief. But grief is never an excuse for betrayal." My son, sitting across from us, remained quiet. Finally, he spoke. "I thought I was protecting you, but all I did was hurt everyone." That was the turning point. Not with anger. Not with punishment. But with the truth. I looked at them and said, "You've learned the hard way that respect isn't given automatically. It's earned. And trust, once broken, must be rebuilt, carefully, deliberately, and honestly." They listened. For the first time, fully. Over the next few days, we began rebuilding. Slowly. Not by words. Not by promises. But by actions. They followed the rules. Respected the boundaries. Started participating, not controlling. And I, for the first time in weeks, felt a sense of peace. The house felt alive again. The walls didn't echo with betrayal. They echoed with accountability and, eventually, respect. It wasn't immediate. It wasn't easy. But it was real. I realized then that revenge isn't always about taking things away. It isn't about making someone pay. Sometimes, the most powerful revenge is quiet, strategic, and rooted in clarity. I let them face the consequences of their choices. I let them confront the truth. And I watched as they transformed from entitlement and panic into reflection and humility. Months later, my home was whole again. My children approached me with a newfound respect. And for the first time, our conversations were honest. No manipulation. No deceit. just acknowledgement. And I understood something vital. The real victory wasn't in regaining control over property or money. It was in restoring integrity, setting boundaries, and showing that no one, not even those closest to you, can assume power over your life without facing consequences. That's the lesson they learned. And that's the lesson I'll never forget. Because grief had made me vulnerable. Betrayal had tested me. But patience, clarity, and measured action had given me back not only my home and my rights, but also my dignity. And when my children finally realized the gravity of their mistakes, I saw something I hadn't expected: regret, understanding, a willingness to change. Not immediately perfect, but the first real step toward repair. That's when I knew the story wasn't just about what they lost. It was about what they gained, finally learning that respect cannot be stolen. And that trust, once broken, must be honored with actions, not words. I sat in my favorite chair that evening, looking around my home. The walls no longer echoed betrayal. They held the memories of my wife, my life, and the lessons that finally, after so much pain, had been learned. And I smiled quietly, knowing this. I had survived grief. I had survived betrayal. And I had emerged stronger, wiser, and in full control of my life.